Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the cosmos. I'm Rocken Larry Locken with Pleiadian Light Grid Project in association with Pleiadian Express Productions. It's a beautiful evening here on the Oregon coast. Lots of rain and thunderstorms in the forecast, and we're just sitting here tonight, and we're gonna have a relaxing talk. I'm gonna bring on with me um, a Starseed gentleman that I met in one of the Facebook groups by the name of Sam Rogers. And Sam's going to talk to us a little bit about his awakening, his journey, where he is right now in the process. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I started Pleiadian Express Productions, as well as the Pleiadian Light Grid Project about 2.5 years ago, my intention was to focus on, star seeds, just what you might call regular, average, everyday star seeds, focus on them and their stories. We've all heard from the greats, of course, like David Icke and Barbara Marciniak, Dolores Cannon, Eric von Doniken. I could go on and on and on. But really, now is the time, and it's been the time to hear from Starseed. So we're going to go ahead and showcase Starseed Sam Rogers. And without further ado, I would like to welcome him to the show. If I can get this mute button off of him there. Let's see here. Okay, now Sammy should be able to unmute your mic.
There we go. Hi, Larry. Thank you for the opportunity to hopefully be of help to others who might be listening. And it's a pleasure to be here at the Pleiadian Talk Show.
Well, thank you so much. We talked last night for quite a while, and I found your story really intriguing because, like so many other star seeds, you have your own story that's intricate and very unique. And I'd like to kind of just start off with, letting the audience know, how your journey began, as a young man, the various faiths and religions that you studied, and just kind of your story. And this is your time, and just say what you want to say, and we'll go from there. Just kind of free flow here in the Light Grid studio.
Great. Awesome. Well, what comes to mind right off the top is that my mother was a very deeply spiritual person and a seeker. She many of us who are coming to understand that we are a little different. She was what is called bipolar. She had a bipolar. They consider it a mental illness. I'm not so sure if these so-called disorders are actually an illness, but that's a whole nother talk show. But so I was instilled with that curiosity that my mother had, and was exposed to things that maybe children of my age wouldn't have normally been exposed to because she was a seeker. She was always turning over another stone, to find answers for herself and to contribute to her own spiritual journey. So that's where I come from, and I've turned over a lot of stones myself. So I would just urge you to ask whatever you want, and we'll go from there.
Well, yeah, I'd like to just say before I was going to ask anything and let people know out there that you and I we kind of come from the same kind of stomping grounds area of the country, but we're both from the Pacific Northwest. I'm from on the Southern Oregon coast. Of course, you're up in you're from the big city of Portland and live an hour and a half now out of that in Washington, and close, not too far from the Assetti Ranch of James Gillens, I do understand. But what I'd kind of like you to do is just kind of go in like chronological order. You were talking about the first religion that you had studied, when you were younger, and just kind of talk about that and how that went. And I'd like for you to really share that story with the audience you shared with me last night regarding, your experience out there in the woods. But we'll start off with your your spiritual quest and what you were studying.
Well, before I was aware of any kind of religion, my parents did baptize me. I think it was in the Presbyterian church, and I was presented with the Bible by my mother. But I was never really drawn to Christianity. I was exposed to Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary with the book Be Here Now, and read that when I was 10 years old. Also was exposed to Alan Watts, who is still one of my favorite authors. And I, having that experience of reading that book, Be Here Now, my mother later was a housekeeper for a woman who was the mother of a gentleman who sponsored Ram Dass to come to Portland. And we had an opportunity to visit with not Ram Dass, but Bhagavan Das, his cohort. And here I was, 10 or 11 years old. Both my brothers were there and my mother. And we hung out at this beautiful estate by the pool with Bhagavan Das. And we got some Henry Indry's rhubarb wine from West Lynn and some really good smoke. And just hung out with this guy who he had his consort with him, beautiful young woman. And they were just being there. You're just being so excited. And we went to the sauna, and I was sitting there across from him, and he was sitting cross-legged. And I didn't know what to, I wanted to ask him something. I just, I didn't know what. I asked him, I said, so do you do yoga? His eyes and looked at me, and he goes, no, I just sit this way.
About what year do you think that was in? If you could, what year do you think that was in? You said you were 10 or 11.
Yeah, it was like 1968, 69.
Okay. Wow. So, I mean, yeah, pretty innovative. And here you are, 10 or 11. And I noticed, you talked about your mom working as a maid and, out in Westland, you were from that other side of the tracks, but you got exposed to how, and for people who don't know, Westland is like the creme de la creme and Lake Oswego, creme de la creme neighborhoods in the Pacific Northwest. So, yeah. So, so what did so from that experience that, then kind of, then take us through what happened.
Yeah, well, that's where we bought the Henry Henry's rhubarb wine, was in West Lynn. I didn't actually live there. I lived in Lake Oswego, Lake Grove, 15, 20 minutes away from West Lynn. But yeah, so what was the question again?
So like after you asked that question, so like, did your interest go from there in that particular in those particular teachings?
It did influence me later on. I was at going to school in Lake Grove, Lake Oswego, and I was transferred after the new high school was built, Lake Ridge High School. So most of my friends ended up staying at the old high school in Lake Oswego, and I was transferred to the newer school, which was in the area of Lake Oswego where there were a lot of people, with money. I was in the poor family in the wealthy hamlet of Lake Oswego. So I went there. I wasn't very happy. The high school principal there was the vice principal at the old junior high that I attended, and of course he was well aware that my brothers were friends of friends who smoked marijuana and sold it, and so we were really kind of singled out as the bad seeds. And I transferred out of high school, essentially dropped out, and went to an alternative high school in Portland, southeast Portland, called Willamette Learning. And I caught wind of that and asked my mom if I could drop out and go there, and she said sure. So once the principal of Lake Ridge High School, he stopped me in the hallway and made sure nobody was around, and he said, and this guy was really tall, he looked like Lurch from the Addams Family, and he said, I knew that your kind couldn't make it at our school. Right?
Yeah, typical.
And so, in my mind, I've been listening to Hendrix and Zappa and Ozzy, and I dropped acid for the first time when I was 11. Started smoking pot when I was 10. And I just thought to myself, wow, I'm sure glad I don't live between your ears. And that's exactly what I told him. and I walked away. He was stunned. His eyes were like, his mouth was open. So,
That's amazing because it can be a real hurtful experience when you're told something like that when you're younger and trying to, figure things out. And especially in those days, you had a lot more judgmental people in roles like that could get away with saying that kind of stuff, and taking kids to the side, threatening them. I know it happened at my school in my day. And yeah, it's just not right. So, so you were at the learning center, and then uh, after that phase, then what came about through that?
well, let me just say before I move on is that
Sure.
his mentality was just indicative of so many people that are just not aware of the fact that if he'd have had any compassion, he would have looked into my life and seen the chaos that I grew up in and try to help me rather than make me his enemy. So anyway, after that, yeah, I attended this alternative high school, Willamette Learning Center, and when I arrived there, quickly got to know who my people that I vibed with were there, and one of which was a good friend of mine, Larry Hagan, and he was a really accomplished guitar player. I think I was 12 or 13 at that time, but we formed a band around his talent as a guitar player, and the band was eventually named Felicidades. We played Portland, and it was a reggae slash ska band. We did play a little bit of jazz, and we were also influenced and mentored by a band in Portland at the time called Upepo, a sort of a Brazilian jazz band, pop band. So we just had a lot of fun. I didn't pursue a diploma or anything. I just had a lot of fun engaging with people and learning new things. We would often take trips to, like, say, one year we went to Mexico, and we all piled on a bus. It was called the Gray Rabbit at the time. Now it's called the Green Tortoise. They take people to and from Eugene. And the tail end of the hippie culture, and a lot of really amazing times. We hiked into the Grand Canyon and back out one year in the same day, and that was amazing. And we went to Mexico another year, where sure if I should mention this or not, but I was young, hooked up with my teacher, who was probably 10 years older than me, and that was kind of my passage into manhood. So I'll always be grateful to her for that. I was really shy when it came to
Wow.
women.
So you had, by the time you were, I mean, 11 years, man, LSD at 11. Wow. I thought, at 15 it was crazy, but I had tried it. But wow. So you had quite we're getting into the mid 70s here. You're starting to get into your 20s and whatnot. So then what happened? Did you get married? Did you, what came in, what came in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood during that spell?
Well, I had a lot of fun with the band, but there was a point at which it didn't become fun. And I always feel about any kind of art or music, if it's not fun, and it doesn't have some kind of meaning, that it has no interest for me. It doesn't matter what it is. I enjoy playing music. I've never read music. Uh, I just have always been one that likes to get to the good part. So it's hard for me to be disciplined in practicing scales and all that. But I play very well by ear. Um, but there was a point at which the egos were just very draining, and I became disillusioned by being in the band. My family had fallen apart after a divorce of my mother, and my father turned out to be my stepfather when I was 12. I found out about that. That's another thing. But yeah, my actual biological father, is a Hungarian who defected to the States in 1956. And that's another story. I met him at some point. But anyway, I left the band due to the fact that my brother introduced me to the Hare Krishnas. And I started going to their feasts on Sunday. and started reading the literature and was approached by them to become a devotee, or a bhakti, as they call it, a celibate, single devotee to Krishna. And so that began my pursuit of spirituality and spiritual practice. And I remained there for a year and received a initiated spiritual name. Sham Sundar was the name that they gave me, who was the version of Krishna, who is the blue cowherd boy that plays the flute, hangs out with the gopis and the cows and the bees and the birds and all that. And so to me, that was really an ego boost, a self-esteem boost for me. But I ended up leaving because the temple was in turmoil, and I asking a lot of questions, and they wouldn't give me any answers, and they just said, just chant and kind of go away, you know. So I became pretty disillusioned in a hurry and tried to sneak out, and they stopped me and gave me the spiel about going to hell and my family ahead of me and behind me going to hell. And at one point I was chanting in the stairwell, and the replacement temple president, who was brought in because the original temple president withdrew all the money out of the temple's account and skated. So here was this other temple president, and I was chanting in the stairwell. He came up to me and he said, Prabhu, you should be chanting in the temple room. And by this time I was really kind of jaded and angry about how I was being treated. And I said, well, you thing in the literature that says I can't chant in the stairwell. And before I knew it, he had spun me around and bloodied my nose. So at that point, I was determined to leave. That evening, I lowered a rope with my suitcase down from the second floor balcony and slid down the rope and walked to my mother's apartment that was 4 blocks away. And I hired a lawyer the next day and sued them and won a small sum of $1,200. The principal, I did that. So.
Wow, I think that leads me to another thing. When you're talking about sneaking out of there, whether it's that or other religions or other things, they really get, I mean, what's it like when they try to manipulate you, like in a cult like setting? I mean, you really felt like you were escaping from there. I mean, they really do. So the stereotype is right. They really do try to use every kind of mind control in those situations to keep you in their organization. And all they do in the meantime is they really lose perspective on what they're really trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, the thing is that I was devoted, to what I thought was my ticket to enlightenment, my ticket out of this crazy world. And I was sincere about it. And so it was really kind of ignorant of them to treat me in the way that they did. But that's on them. It's not on me. They did try to teach us deceptive, tactics when I was one of the guys that went out to distribute flowers and get donations and distribute the books. And I was at the Portland airport with the wig and, all that. And they tried to teach us deceptive methods, like Christian consciousness, not Krishna, like kind of, deceive people. And I never did that. I said, look, I'm just gonna put it right out there to people. I'm a Hare Krishna. This is what I'm doing. If you want to donate, great. If not, and I got better response that way than most of the other guys. I was one of the biggest earners because of that. I was honest with people. I didn't go in for this us and them kind of mentality. We're the devotees and they're the Karis, and it's us against them. I just never went in for that.
I think that's a mentality that most starseeds don't vibe with, because any organization you see, no matter what, it's always like this, whether it's a nation, a cult, a religion, it seems like it's always this us against them mentality seeps in instead of more of a oneness with humanity and a consciousness. And so, so that happened. And then tell me about what led to your experience up there that we were talking about last night. You want to share that with the You know.
Oh, with visitation.
Yes.
Okay, well, I've got to fast forward not too far. After getting some years behind me, and I actually at one point joined the army. That's a whole nother story, but that was essentially to get away from my dysfunctional family. And I came back, met my wife. This was in 1990, 6 months into 1990. Ended up living with her for 6 years, and we got married at that point. So we were together, unmarried for six, and together for another six, married. And the marriage, it was.
You're cutting out there. What was
That
that? Go ahead.
Well, it was the failure of my marriage that. Well, what happened is I hung on so long to a unhealthy situation because I adored this woman. She was my best friend. I really had my intention was to be with her until one of us died. I was 100% committed to her, but I feel that she began to take me for granted, and I was very much a little boy in need of nurture when I entered that relationship, and I knew it, and I told her, and it was all right out in the open. I've had therapy, a lot of therapy in my life, and she, she was just the ticket for me. She laid down the law, and I went out and I worked and brought home the money, and it was great until the little boy started to grow up, and I needed some more wiggle room, and she just couldn't go there with me. So it began to open up a chasm in our relationship, and in which we were just arguing all the time, and it was miserable. So, but I hung on and hung on. I tried marriage counseling, and nothing seemed to work until finally I snapped. It was like a light switch went off. I guess we've called in the old days a nervous breakdown. Um, but to me, it felt as though I was touched by God, like God put his hand on me and grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, okay, now we're taking you out of this situation, and I'm going to shake all of this unnecessary stuff off of you so you can be thrust out in the world naked, and let's just roll the dice and see what happens. So my divorce was finalized in 2004. I remained to be what is called, I was diagnosed as being bipolar. To me, it felt like a switch had been flipped and all of my brain synapses were connected. All of my cylinders were firing at the same time. And it was like I was just compelled to just to move out and just do what came to my heart to do. I was homeless for many years. I had some really amazing experiences up until the point where I went. Well, I'm sorry. I actually did the event of my visitation happened during the time of my divorce or shortly thereafter. I packed up my vehicle and I was trying to sneak out of my house. Here I'm sneaking out again. And my wife caught me. You know, she was still my wife at that point. And I said, I'm out of here. I'm gone. I was headed to Trout Lake to a rave that I caught wind of. I just saw this picture of a phoenix and read this flyer at a music store. And I was off to this rave. And it just so happened it was some young people that I did some trance dancing in Portland. And, you know, like I said, I was just living my life, you know, celebrating, just going where the wind of my soul took me. And so it took me to Trout Lake. It was a week before this rave was going to happen. I got there a week early. I forget how that happened, but people there said, "Oh, yeah, that's cool. You can camp out here and for the night." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to help you guys prep if I could." And she said, "Well, the crew that's actually putting the event on, they're not going to be here for another 2 or 3 days. But yeah, you're certainly welcome to." So um, I had my bedroll and everything, and I had some spiritual implements, a couple Buddhist statues and some things, and incense, and so I laid out my bedroll underneath trellis. It was up against a fence facing north, and I laid my blankets down and set up my shrine and said my prayers the four directions. And when I laid down, the constellation was directly above me, and I'm a double Taurus, so to me it had great significance. And so just before the rave on July 4th, that evening before the show, I was just there in my car, sitting there and just, praying to our visitors, our extraterrestrial, friends that I know and have believed that are here, to say, look, I want to have some kind of sign that you're real, and just please don't scare the heck out of me. So that next morning, before the rave, of course, there was a guy that was overseeing James Gilland's Sattva sanctuary, is what they called it, who talked me into smoking a little pot, because I hadn't been high on anything for years, and he gave me a bag of mushrooms. Well, they happened to be Amanita muscaria, and he had dried them, and I just took off and got a bunch of my spiritual books and put them in the middle of this field, said the prayers, and I was munching on these mushrooms. I didn't have any water, hadn't eaten breakfast, and it wasn't too long before I started.
Oh, man, those things are gross to eat without any. I mean, you were eating those things raw.
Oh yeah, I was munching on them without any kind of idea what I was doing. I was just so out there on this. Like I said, I just felt like I was being compelled by this outside force. So yeah, I started going out of body. I started blacking out, but I was out of body. Was as if I was just a point of consciousness out in space, and it was just completely black. But with the exception of the images that I began to see, one of which was a like a giant Ferris wheel type thing. It was like a slide projector, that every time it would move one click, ka-chunk, I would be encased in fire, encased in stone, ka-chunk, ice, whatever. It was terrifying. So I'd come in and out of consciousness, and I was just walking through the woods. At one point, I was out of body again, and I was being drawn into a black hole on a ribbon of energy. And it looked like a yin yang. I was being drawn in, and then on the opposite side, the energy was going out, in an S shape, like the yin yang. And that was terrifying, because I felt as though being drawn in to the black hole, I was being slated for destruction. And so anyway, again, I was back in my body and was walking just upright through the woods, and I was stopped by what was an invisible wall. That's all, the only way I can describe it. It's like a force field. I would push on it, and I couldn't move. I could walk back, I could walk back in the opposite direction, but I couldn't move forward. So I looked down at my feet, and there was a glyph type image that was as if it was stamped into the ground, perfectly graphically correct. And what I call it is Space Bird. It's this kind of a crop circle-like image. It's sort of a ladybug looking character. There's like a half circle on top, and it's kind of got a beak on the right side, two circles at the bottom right where the beak comes out. It looks like an eye. One from the middle of it that looks like a classic symbol for a ground, electrical ground. And then two nodes up in the upper left corner of the sphere that to me represented the Pleiades, the seven sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was very clear that this was presented to me by my extraterrestrial Pleiadian friends. I've puzzled over it for years and years. I've asked other people, and at one point, a young gentleman said, "Well, maybe this was just something that was meant for you to understand, and nobody else." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah." And at the very least, it made me think out other and things I don't understand, and that's okay. But I'm coming to learn that I think I do have Pleiadian DNA. Some of us do. I think others have different DNA from different um,
Star systems.
the different. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as I began to learn more about star seeds and all this, I'm relaxing into the fact that this is real, and other people think it's woo woo and wacky and crazy, but I've considered it to be crazy all my life. It's nothing new to me. So,
Well, yeah,
and
you
of course,
definitely have all the characteristics of a star seed, and being a Taurus, especially, and up in this part of the country, in the Pacific Northwest, like we were talking about, and I always tell people, you take that top third of California through Oregon and Washington and into BC. This is Lemurian and Pleiadian country, big time, and especially over by Gillen's Ranch. It's like
mm-hmm,
that in all the Northwest, but over by there, it's really with Mount Adams and whatnot, you are really in the prime location to have an
sure.
experience like this. And it totally fits. Either that or you're part of the biggest set of coincidences that have ever happened to anybody. But I don't believe in coincidence. So,
Yeah, right, right.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So then what progressed after that? I know that it didn't, things kind of went south, if I'm not
Uh,
mistaken.
oh yeah, actually, yeah, things went southwest or southeast to the County Jail. Click County Jail. Yeah, I was at that point. I was so just out of it, out of touch with regular waking life. I passed out on the side of the road. I woke up on the side of this gravel road, and I knew I needed assistance. And I heard a car. I couldn't really see. It was as if I was looking through a tunnel, like a tube. I had tunnel vision. I could hear things, and so I put my hand out, and somebody stopped. To this day, I don't know who it was. Didn't really see their face. It was like these little flashes of images that I recall. I remember the car. I remember seeing the dashboard. I remember feeling a desperate need to find something, find a key to preventing everyone on Earth from disappearing. I was terrified that I was going to be alone, which is interesting. And that goes to the core issue of my family of origin issues of abandonment, because my mother was mentally ill and often in psych units and things. But um, the person that picked me up dropped me at the Trout Lake Ranger Station, where many volunteer firemen were just putting away their gear and getting rides home. And so I was dropped in the middle of this parking lot at the ranger station, and I noticed I would see a vehicle enter the car park, and I'd see the same vehicle come in a millisecond later. Same vehicle. It was like a time loop. And again, I was terrified that there was something I had to do in order to prevent all the people on Earth from disappearing and leaving me there alone. And one of which was to find someone who would stand there and allow me to first touch the ground and then draw a line around their body and touch the ground on the other side. Where that came from, but of course these people were looking at me and going, "What the heck is going on?" So anyway, that didn't happen. I went into the ranger station through a roll-up door. There were two large roll-up doors where they had their vehicles, and went inside, looked in a cubicle that was in one corner of the building, and saw inside on what I thought on the desk key. And I tried to open the door. It was locked. Tried to bust the window. It was quarter-inch thick plate glass. So I grabbed what was closest to smash through this window as a rolling metal staircase for climbing up and getting things off shelves. And I crashed through the window, dove into the office, and discovered that what I thought was a key was actually a taped key that they would set there. And so I did what I could to retain that image by when you like put a piece of paper over a penny and rub a pencil across it, you can get the image of the penny. Well, that's what I did with this key image and taped it to my stomach, and then the door, and I heard a voice say, "Get on the ground." And of course, we all know what that means, from watching or hearing of police,
Yes.
cane a perpetrator. So I laid down on all this glass that was on the floor for just a couple seconds, and my attention span was really short at that point. So I just got up. I was just so thirsty and dehydrated. I went over to the eye wash station and drank a bunch of water, and then just simply walked outside and sat down on a bench against the wall of the ranger station and calmly. And the people called EMTs, and they came and picked me up and took me to the hospital and drew blood and fluids and pumped me full of saline and then they sent me on my way, and I thought, well, okay, I'm good to go. And well, there was a state bull waiting for me, and he said, "Well, son, you're going to the pokey." And it was a 2-hour drive. I had my shorts and a tank top, and he was kind enough to turn the air conditioning on for me for that 2-hour ride, and I was freezing. Pretty cruel. Anyway, took me to jail, booked me, put me in what I realized later was the rubber room. It was a room that had a grate in the middle of it, and it had this spray-on rubber. It was orange. Oh, I had to go to the bathroom. That I realized I was in the rubber room. They said, "Well, there it is, in the middle of the floor." And I go, "Oh, okay." So I started to get my wits about me. Started to mushrooms, and so I said, "Okay, it's a small town, small minds." So I said, would Jesus treat a mentally ill person this way? And a normal toilet, please. So they put me in a cell with a toilet and a mattress and all that. And so from there, it was just waiting. It was horrifying because I had brought my cat with me to Trout Lake too, and he was there at the Sapa Sanctuary at Larry Gilliland's, and I was just deathly afraid that he was going to be lost. He was my best friend. But my friend Larry, I called him, again, the guitar player, my friend who I'd met, years before in alternative high school. He was kind enough to drive all the way from Portland to Trout Lake and secure my cat. And, he stopped by to find out what was going on with the police and determine how long I was going to be there. And I was there for an entire month, and then was released, had to get a bail bondsman to bond me out. I think my friend Larry put up the money, but I had to remain there. I was homeless in Goldendale for like 3 days until I was able to leave. I think my friend Larry came to pick me up as well. A really good friend of mine. So that was the story of Spacebird, and I've since made a sculpture of the image, and of course I'll never forget it. Sculpture of it too, and I have a picture of it that I could post, that I actually posted to you. So
Yeah, we'll put it in the comment section when we post this on Facebook, because I had a chance to take a look at it last night, and yeah, it was amazing. It was something very unique that obviously came from your consciousness. I've never seen anything quite like it before.
yeah, neither have I. Only in crop circles. It has a real distinctive kind of crop circle feel to it. And of course, if you look at it upside down, it looks like a ship, a boat, with a mast and oars. Just really interesting image.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and it takes a lot to catch my eye, but that was something unique that you showed me, and I'm like, yeah, that's something a little bit different. And of course, that's why I was so drawn to talking to you and maybe bringing you on air. And so after that experience, then kind of, where did it go from there once those 3 days were up and, you were able to leave town?
Yeah, I believe what happened from there is that I called another friend of mine, Tom, who I also played music with and recorded some stuff with, Tom Chandler, old friend of mine from junior high. he said, well, I just happen to know a guy who would probably put you up. His name's David Messenger. He's somebody that was in our circle back then. I'd never met him. I think I'd with him on occasion. He's a musician, does records other people. Very interesting guy. He's an Aquarius zodiac sign, and just a really bright. He, you know, he kind of remembered me. He said, "Sure, tell him to come on over." So I was there with my cat. I did have a vehicle, my Ford Escape, which that was it. I was able to drive myself back. That was right. I had my own car. So yeah, I drove back to Portland with my cat and went to stay with David Messenger until I moved into another residence with a friend who I knew through the AA program. And I won't mention his name due to anonymity purposes, but yeah, I think I stayed with Dave about a year and then stayed with this other friend for another year and a half, and I maintained my job as a Teamster doing delivery work up and down the gorge and in Portland. The real tragedy in all this was that Harley ended up missing. He was always an indoor-outdoor cat, and Milwaukee was where I was living, and it was known for coyotes, and I just didn't think anything of it. And I think he went missing, and I think it was a coyote that got him. So at that point,
man. Oh, that's oh God, I hate to hear that because I have three cats and they're so very dear to me. But for all those of you out there, when he mentioned Milwaukee, Milwaukee is a suburb of Portland. He's not talking about Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I just had to throw that in.
yeah, good to go. So yeah, there's a lot of little asides. I mean, it's hard for me to put everything in chronological order.
Totally, because we're all
But
over the place, and that's how we work here, and it's fine because that's how us Pleiadians and Starseeds are. We don't really exist in time, especially up here in the Northwest, where the veil is so thin. Okay, so amazing. So, where does that put you? Right, what are you focusing on right now? You mentioned that your passion for true Christianity, and is that where you're at right now? Is studying that faith and just kind of where is Sam at right now?
well, I should say that the years following the event in Trout Lake were getting over the grief of the loss of my marriage, and I really didn't get completely over that until just within the last year when I arrived in Goldendale. So I arrived in Goldendale here 2 years ago. I was just looking at it. So it's been 2 years that I've been here in Goldendale. So I guess 2014 was when I arrived here. And I had let my job go, all my jobs, and I was homeless for quite some time. So before I landed here, I was homeless until Section 8 HUD called me and placed me in an apartment in Roseburg, Oregon.
Just an hour east from me, my friend. Good old Roseburg.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's only an hour drive from here to the east. Yeah, that's where that course everybody knows that's where that shooting happened at the community college this last year.
Yep.
That all these idiots were calling a false flag, which really happened. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so I arrived in Roseburg. Finally, the VA got smart and started realizing that the best way to help homeless veterans was to give them shelter first before they did anything. I mean, what a relief after being homeless for probably a better part of 10 years to finally have it was a brand new apartment. I was the first resident there. Beautiful setting on VA grounds. And it was from there, because there was a point at which I said, God, if you'll get me through all this, I will devote the rest of my life to helping others as much as possible. So when I arrived in Roseburg and got settled, I started volunteering at, through the various churches. And from there, I moved a family. I befriended a family when I was in Hillsborough. I was staying with a veteran friend, homeless, and when Section 8, when HUD called me from Douglas County in Roseburg. I had become friends with a young woman who was 21 years old, but she was like a 12-year-old emotionally. She was considered developmentally disabled. And she had a number of predators that were after her because she was curious. She's a young woman at this point and sexually curious, but she would end up getting raped. And she had been raped a number of times, much to her mother's dismay, but she couldn't keep her from going out. And Renee, her mother, had multiple sclerosis. Her stepfather, Elizabeth was the young girl's name, and her stepfather had his issues as well. But it was just this sad situation of this family just struggling, hanging on by their fingernails. And of course, Elizabeth kept in touch with me when I moved to Roseburg, and there was an incident that I found out about regarding a Hispanic man who was probably in his mid-60s, who was after Elizabeth and her mother. And I found out about it, and I called Renee, and I said, Renee, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to help you guys get out of there. I said, would you want to move to Roseburg? And she said, sure. So I hadn't worked for quite some time, any kind of, steady work or physical work especially. And I opened up the phone book, and within 3 days, I had a job with a construction company that were building some houses in Florence, Oregon, on the coast. And I said, I'll work for $10 an hour cash. I'm an experienced carpenter. Went down there, worked for 3 weeks solid, 13, 14-hour days. And that's when I knew there was an outside force supporting me. I think that was really when I had a born again experience. That's when I knew, especially when somebody's motivated by love, that they get assistance from outside. And so I came back, I earned $1,800. I sent Renee $1,500. They moved to Roseburg with the help of a friend, lived with me for about 40 days in my apartment. I almost got evicted over it. And we finally found them a place to stay. So that began another part of my spiritual journey was to really give back. And met a friend on Facebook whose mother was passing in New Jersey, where she grew up. Janet Munch, a friend of mine on Facebook still. She's in LA now. And we talked and got really close, and her mother was there. And, it was just such a joy getting to know her. It was just being in the moment. And we became really close, and her mother passed. And she said, well, you like helping and volunteering for people. You want to come and help me? And I said, sure. So she bought me a round trip ticket to New Jersey, went in and painted her entire inside of her house, did a whole bunch of repair things and stuff over a month. And then came back here, and she sold her home and got a really good price for it. So there was that. And then a friend of mine who I went to the alternative high school 40 years ago here in Goldendale, she said, well, why don't you come and help us? And I said, just get me a bus ticket. And came here, and it was a very tragic situation with her dying father-in-law, who was staying in a motorhome on property, and it was against county rules here in Goldendale. So they needed to prep the inside of the house to keep him there and care for him. And in the meantime, they also had a desire to have a deck and a covered gable porch built, which I did. And the agreement was I would come here and move here, and I'd be their groundskeeper, break their leaves every year, because they also had physical limitations, and very sick, actually, both of them. So that was the deal. I'd come here, and they'd help me settle in, and whatever that meant. Turns out, Section 8 covers my rent, but now the landlord raised the rent, and I'm on the hook for my utilities, which isn't really much. I have found work here now, but when the work was done, this is a whole nother story. But there's a love. I fell in love with a friend of theirs, and that all fell apart, and I was just left feeling betrayed and hurt and heartbroken, and it was just really yet another dark night of the soul that I made it through. And since then, I've established Christian friendships, and I'm finding that I can be comfortable anywhere, in a synagogue, in a church, in any kind of temple. I just feel that God is God. Now, Christians will disagree and say, well, there is only one God, and you have to go take certain steps to, I don't know about that, but, I'm going with the flow, and I do feel like I'm continually born again. If one is sincere about their efforts to connect with the divine within themselves, you do have these experiences where you feel more connected, but truly be born again. When you're born again, it changes your behavior. That's a sign of really being born again.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen with just being baptized in middle age. It's a journey that comes from within. And it's really amazing to hear you articulate it that way. And man, you just situation after situation you've been put in. And, I really feel like you're a healer. You know what I mean? Whether you realize that or not, you've really helped a lot of situations. And man, from what you've been through, it's crazy. It makes me, it reminds me of this TV show called Highway to Heaven. Michael Landon was in, right? He'd come and, be in people's lives and help them out. And then move on to the next situation. You've almost kind of got a situation like that going on, right? And I'm not trying to skip ahead or anything, but like when did you first start to encounter some of these groups or people on Facebook? I mean, I don't need an exact date, but do you remember kind of how that come about and what you thought seeing other people, maybe with similar thoughts, on life and experiences?
Well, I was just looking at that recently, and I joined Facebook like in 2012, I think it was. And I don't know if it was like the beginning of the year or what, but I remember hearing of this thing called Facebook and was curious about it. And, up to that point, I was really new to, the internet. I mean, I knew about the internet, but I was just kind of curious and went and checked it out, and I went, oh, this is pretty neat. You got other people with similar interests, and so I started Facebooking as much as I could. But I really didn't get into Facebook very deeply until I arrived in Roseburg. So that's really where it took off for me. To this day, I have friends, Janet Munch, Lori King, and Annette Maxwell, who is in Australia, and then Marcel, who is in New Zealand. She
Yes,
has
Marcel Boyes. Marcel Boyes, a friend of mine. And I've
Mhm.
been trying to get her to come on the show for a couple of
Mhm.
years now. I think I need to push a little bit harder because she is a very brilliant woman, articulate, very spiritual, got a look. She's kind of a Syrian Pleiadian kind of hybrid, I like to call her. My Syrian
Yeah.
Pleiadian hybrid sister. And and she's amazing, and just it's amazing, right? I mean, people from all over the world, it's just crazy, hooking up with people of like a like mind. And I think we all felt that when encountering some of these Facebook groups. And it's just over the 3.5 years or whatever that I've been doing it and building groups. Yeah, all our
Mhm.
stories are amazing, right? And unique unto their own, but it's like it's leading us to that same road.
Sure. Sure. Well, what I was going to say though is these are individuals that I've actually talked to on the phone. Like you. Women in particular are very cautious. Naturally. But I have always befriended women much easier, and women really are relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
It I just well, I think it has to do with women have this nurturing energy that I crave, and I'm very
You're
similar.
amazing. Of course it is. Of course it is, man. I totally agree with you. And it's amazing when you
Yeah.
find the star sisters out there that feel that way too and aren't like kind of that closed-minded reptilian mind manipulated like maybe your ex-wife was, like mine was. And it's not really their fault, their consciousness was just low. But
Yeah.
I do too. I do totally honor the divine goddessness. I was raised by strong women. you
Oh, I
know.
love strong women, man. Yeah.
Yeah, well, totally, and I think probably women are about 5 to 10% IQ points smarter than men. I'm just saying that's just my experience. I used to run a big
Oh,
company,
I don't.
and I know from my experience they're better workers, they're more dedicated, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but yeah, I crave that, and you and I are kind of on that same wavelength, but maybe it's just that we crave that energy.
No, I think it's true. I think, historically women have, I mean, look at it. They're the child bearers. They cook, they clean. They've just been incredibly strong, much stronger than men. I mean, we just got to go out and hit something over the head and drag it back to the campsite to eat. you know, Maybe do a little fathering, but yeah, women are, they're just stronger. They're superior in most every way, except maybe physically in their muscle, ability to develop muscle. But even that's been blown out of the water too with the, what do they call it? The extreme fighters, and
Oh, totally. Exactly. And I mean, I really do feel like this. I feel like if the last 1,000 years, these countries would have been predominantly had female leaders. Yeah, there'd been a bad apple here and there, but I really feel like we'd probably be about 200 years
oh, that's it.
technologically ahead in the future at least, and we'd be
Oh yeah,
colonizing other planets just because of their nurturing ability and their sense. And like I said, I mean, they're 5 to 10 points IQ wise smarter, and they're great leaders. Everyone
oh
that ever
yeah.
worked for me
War.
was great. It was just, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'd have a new female come on staff, and it's like, man, I mean, I could see that, shit, they were instantly almost ready for like supervisor material. And yeah,
Yeah.
maybe they've had to learn to be that way because they've been beat down over the centuries and had to fight and struggle and claw to get that
Oh
way. But
sure.
and maybe that's just how they are. But it's amazing, and I think the planet has really done itself a big fucking injustice by not, having predominantly female leaders around the world. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just how I feel, and I'll never change that opinion.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here, bud. Yeah. No. War would be non-existent if women were in charge. I'm sure of it.
Oh, totally. So little minute in the history that it wouldn't even make a blurb in a discussion. Yeah, I know. It'd be pretty much, yeah, it would have pretty much not really ever happened.
Well,
Um,
the way I feel is men are to be women's supporters. They're the leaders. We should be supporting them in their efforts. And but my best friends are women. I have very very few men friends that are close, just because of the mentality of most men.
yeah, exactly. I would agree. I would agree with that. The few good ones that are out there seem to get. It's funny. They find the one bad apple of women that are kind of in that lizard mind manipulated control. Where if you went left instead of right on accident, I mean, you'd be grilled, and they'd wonder what the fuck was going on. It was the worst thing
Mm.
that could ever fucking happen. But yet, if they did something, it would be the biggest fucking, they would deny it or act pissed
Mm.
because they got called out on it, or it's just crazy. I mean, you could have a
Now,
you could have
explain.
a family you hold on you could have a family member die, right, and they would have about a quarter as much sympathy for you having that happen as they would have because they fucking busted a nail or something. I mean, I'm exaggerating a tad bit, but not much. But yeah, go ahead, bro.
So you're talking about, expand on that a little bit. I'm not clear as what you're
Well, like
saying.
maybe like the wife you were married to, like the one I was with, they're not quite at that consciousness level yet, right? And when us starseed guys get drawn to that
Well, I don't.
nurturing, and
Well, I don't. Well,
I'm
I've kind of had to look at that because I don't know that that's necessarily true, because I'll tell you what, my ex-wife Marcel, really pushed me to do things that I wouldn't have had confidence.
right.
I didn't have confidence to do. I mean, yeah, I felt betrayed by her, but I don't have. I mean, I'll state the facts about her personality, but I have nothing but good things to say about what I took away from my marriage. Yeah, I paid a high price for it, but the gifts that she left with me in terms of helping me grow up, helping helping me become a
You're
man and
freezing and cutting out.
find.
There you go.
I'm cutting out. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I have recently encountered, and like I said, I've always been drawn to strong women. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I think women like that, like my wife, I think they do have all these amazing qualities that they just aren't aware of yet,
Agreed. Totally agree. Totally agreed. I think it's a growth level, right? It was all part of the plan that you went through this, right? But because of your different growth levels, it was not meant to be to where you two were, say, twin flames, or say, you know, uh, the ones for each other for life. You know what I mean?
Sure,
It's
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at with that. And of course, in my situation, my wife was a little bit deceptive, so there's another story. So
Okay.
I can't judge your experience off mine, but yeah, exactly. Everything for a reason, and it comes to our different, I think, stages of where we're at in our growth sometimes, and we can still all help each other out,
Sure.
no matter what level we're at.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why it's so important just to have respect for each other's process and to not make assumptions and just to always be coming from a place of love and unconditional love. I To delve into a little bit of relationship psychology. I think the thing when a person like me who just adores women. I just adore them. I always have. And part of that comes from my need to be nurtured. But I think what happens when you give too much in a relationship, instead of kind of setting a boundary and having your own sovereignty, and in my relationship with my ex-wife, is that I gave so much that she began to take me for granted, and that was partly from my fault as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she was half Scandinavian, half French, and she was like my way or the highway. And it was almost well, it was kind of well, I'll just say my stepsons. They were both 10 years apart. The oldest was 10 years my younger than me, and his brother was 2 or 3 years younger than him, and we were constantly dealing with my ex-wife's tendency just to, this is it, this is the way it is. I'm not, I know the best, and it was just really difficult. It was damaging to her relationships, and people that knew her just kind of considered her to be an eccentric. But she was very fear-based, and that contributed to her need to control, and ultimately it contributed to the dissolution of our marriage because I couldn't handle it anymore. I needed some freedom.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that fear base, right? And it seems like that always pops back up in situations, at least like I was in, that fear-based mentality. It's doom and gloom and thinking the worst. And if everything's going cool
Sure.
for a couple days, there's got to be something going on wrong or whatever. I mean, it's like they've been listening to Alex Jones all week or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But to bring us back on the theme of the interview here is that I feel that we travel, our star seeds and souls travel in groups. We travel in pods. And I feel that, in some way, shape, or form, everybody we encounter has something to do with our journey, as spiritual beings. I feel that, she taught me a lot, and hopefully I taught her a lot, and we'll meet again. I'm certain of it. I'm certain of it. Like meeting you. That's kind of the cool thing about Facebook is that you don't necessarily meet in person, so you're really kind of you're definitely just getting to know each other in terms of just who you are, your essence.
I'll spare you singing, getting to know you. Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. It's like a collective, traveling
Hmm.
collectives like that. And some people you have a stronger connection with in the Starseed community, whether, like if they are a Pleiadian based, such as you, such as somebody like a Bridget Rao, And then there's
Mm-hmm.
others that you're close with, like with me, Raquel Toombs, but she's kind of in a more ascended kind of a mindset, maybe Arcturian,
Mm-hmm.
and but with
Mm-hmm.
there's all these little idiosyncrasies with us Pleiadians. I see them in you, and I see them in Bridget and me. It's these funny little
Mm-hmm.
in our feelings, and you know a star family member, a star brother or sister versus a star brother or a cousin, or a star sister or cousin. Yeah. God, it's not that late here, and I'm already mumbling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly, man. You had mentioned
You're kind
earlier.
of doing what I call pinging.
I'm pinging probably, yeah. It's my ADD and autism bouncing all over the place. So
Well, I'm quite literally
yeah, yeah,
your signal is bouncing off a satellite and it's going kind of making a space
exactly,
noise. I
exactly.
call it
Pinging.
yeah. I call
Yeah,
it pinging. Yeah.
maybe the Black Knight satellite's trying to screw with my mind. But you were mentioning, you were mentioning some other information that you wanted to share. So a reading or um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, why don't you go ahead and whatever comes to mind and resonates with you, why don't you go ahead and just free flow with that, man?
Okay. I got to check my cord here. It said I stopped charging. Let's see. Charging. Oh, okay. It's still charging. Okay. Yeah. Well, I was thinking of, like to begin an interview or any kind of endeavor to kind of set your intention as to, what you want, the effect you're trying. For me, I just hope this interview helps someone else. Um, and,
You already
that's what I
have, I
try.
can tell you that. We had some comments in the chat that you probably can't see, but you already have resonated with at least one individual, and I know that others you definitely will too. You have with me, and man, you're so calming. And Anna made the comment in the chat room how calming and relaxing you sounded. And I was thinking the same thing, man. I mean, it's just your story's amazing, brother, and I'm glad that I could connect with you. And so, yeah, before we do wrap it up and everything, just kind of, whatever you want to add or go into, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, first thing that came to mind for me was a prayer. It's a prayer of Francis of Assisi, St. Francis. And I'm sure everyone knows this one. It's very popular. And it simply goes like this: Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. That where there is shadows, I may bring light. That where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, and it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. And so it's one of my favorite prayers. And this comes from the AA 12 by 12 book. That I've been
You're a friend of Bill W's too. Okay, cool.
Oh yeah. I had my issues in my teens. So yeah, that's also part of my spiritual journey. Is that AA has been a big part of my growth over the years. I encountered them first when I was 16. Had issues with cocaine that landed me in treatment, and so that's another part of the story that connects to my visiting Ram Dass, Bhagavan Das. My mother's friend Helen Ward was a counselor back in the day, and she was the one that was friends of the woman who owned the estate where I met Ram Dass or Bhagavan Das. So it's all connected, you know. But I feel like I've been especially blessed by my creator, to have, given me the experiences I've had, and yeah, so I feel really blessed. I make an effort to thank God for my life every morning, and for my friends, and live in a mindset of gratitude. So Yeah, this has been really, really fun and awesome. I
It
appreciate
really
the
has, man. And I usually wrap up these interviews by asking, my guests before I go into my spill to end the show. Why don't you let everybody know out there where, if they want to connect with you or know more about you, where they can find you? Of course, on Facebook, on your timeline. But if you have any other areas where they can find you, well, I'll let you speak for yourself and just you can let everybody know, where they
Oh,
can
sure.
find
Well,
you.
I giving my email and or my phone number. What do you think? My email?
Either or, man. Hey, either or. I give out I won't answer it if I don't know you, but I'll I give out my phone number all the time just to see if anybody will call me, that I don't know.
Well, let's just start out with my email address.
Yeah,
That
okay.
way, because I work during the day too, so I don't necessarily want to. You never know the time zones and stuff too. So I'll just give my email address, which is I'll have to spell it out. It's S as in Sierra, I as in Indigo, G as in George, N as in Nevada, I as in, what was the I one? SIG, SIG, NI, FITY, Signifity 43
At
dot com.
gmail.com. That was
Yeah, Signifity.
yeah, that was
Go ahead.
Sam Ida George Nora Ida Frank Ida Tom Young.
Yeah, yeah. I
43.
I I I ca- I came up with that from my title of a song by one of my favorite bands, Porcupine Tree. He is so. Yep, Sam Rogers at Gmail.
I like it. I like that. Significant. Yeah, I remember earlier before the show, I was trying to get it down. You had to tell it to me like three times. I'm like, significant. I'm trying to write it down and take notes. But I've really appreciated having you on the show, brother. And I hope that this isn't the last time, definitely. On that note, I'd like to remind everybody, as a special note, this Monday at 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Pleiadian Express Productions, Bridget Rao and I we'll be doing a show about the flat earth and kind of, yeah, we think the flat earth is bullshit, but you should hear some of Bridget's takes on it. And, she's really, to me, she's like the premier Pleiadian channeler of our time, just starting to come forward. And the girl is really brilliant. But anyway, my name is Rocken Larry Locken. Of course, you can find me. I've got about 40 groups I created on Facebook that are Starseed related, 20 pages. But to make it real simple, you can go to a page called Pleiadian Groups and Pages. There's a group called that too I'd created, but don't go there. Go to Pleiadian Groups and Pages page, and you can see a list of all our groups, our websites. You can check out our website at larrylocken.wix.com, Pleiadian Express Pro. And if you like what we do, please. Our equipment sucks. It's nice to eat once in a while. If you want to make a $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, $20 donation, you can go to You can go to that website and hit the donate button. It would really be appreciated. It takes literally 20 seconds to do with any debit card in the world, and you'd be providing somebody with a meal. So I really appreciate it. And with that being said, I'll end my shows like I usually always do, with a big cosmic dating game kiss to everybody out there. Mwah. And that's a wrap from the Oregon coast and the Pacific Northwest, Lemurian and Pleiadian country, baby.